One thing I did want to, oh, we're live.
Okay. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? We've accomplished it a few times, but it usually doesn't, and we're not going to strive for it today because I have a guest I am very excited to talk to, and you'll see why I say that in a little bit, I'm sure. But my guest today is Laurin Wittig, and I hope I didn't butcher that, but
Perfect.
Yes, an intuitive healer and award-winning author with over 600K books sold, over 600,000 people. I was so impressed when I saw that last night. I was like, oh my God, I cannot wait to have this conversation. But yes, we are back once again. And first things first, how you doing today, Laurin?
I'm doing great. I started the day with a neighborhood holiday party, so it's been a good day so far.
Not something you hear in the morning usually, but that's a great thing. I like that idea.
Yeah, it was hot chocolate and cookies, and the neighbors brought their dogs, and it was really nice to see everybody. So yeah, my day started off great.
Well, glad to hear it. Well, I got to sleep in, so that's always good for my weekend if it starts off that way. But well, the first question I ask everybody is, what brought you into this paranormal/spiritual world that we now coexist in?
It's been a long journey, and I think my first experiences were when I was about 10 or 11, and we moved into the house of a distant relative. After she passed away, my parents bought her a really old house. It was built in the 1820s, I believe. And my bedroom was the cousin's bedroom, and she had died in that room. And she had talked about one of her aunts coming and sitting at the end of her bed and talking to her regularly long after she had passed. And apparently, I don't really remember it, but my dad used to tell stories about me telling him stories about my adventures with the ghosts in my bedroom. And so that was one of my very first experiences. And as so much with the work that I do when I'm not entirely in the ordinary world, my memory doesn't always, I don't always remember everything that I do. So people are constantly going, you remember when you told me this? And it's like, no, I really don't. But the first time I was really aware as an adult, it was when I was writing books, and we had a conference every year in I can't even think of the name of it anymore, but this little town in West Virginia, this old ancient hotel that was known to be had ghosts in it. I'm going to get my words working any second now. But I had to go up a night early because I was on one of the committees. I had to be there to set up, and there was a torrential storm. And this is set up high over the confluence of two rivers. There's a train track that comes through, so you hear the trains at night. And this place is ancient. The windows rattle. Everything is a little funky. Nothing's really, straight or flat. It's that kind of building. And I had been through a hurricane here in my house in 2003. So just a couple of years before that. And I had some pretty serious PTSD from that experience because we had trees falling on the house. The kids were young. We wrote it out. So I'm in this room by myself trying to sleep at night. And the wind is actually making the curtains move in the room. And I had to put towels around the air conditioning unit to keep the rain out. And I'm freaking out a little bit. And all of a sudden I feel, and I have to say that my bed is up in the corner of the room against the wall. So there's nothing behind me but wall. And I had my back up almost to the wall completely. And I feel this very calm hand just pat me on the back, my shoulder. And it felt very grandmotherly, and it felt very calming. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the morning. So I slept through the rest of the storm. But that's my first experience knowing that there was nobody there, but I very, very clearly felt that little pat on the back, and that knowingness that I was gonna be okay.
That's gorgeous in a way. It's almost like something you'd see in a movie, like a spirit, like just letting someone know everything's going to be okay. And
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that I guess a spirit patting you in the back can go one of two ways. And thank God it went the way it did for you, because I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
some
yeah.
people, some people would be Shaggy and Scooby Dooing it out of there if that happened. But wow, I mean, and I've been trying to quiz my brain to see if I can think of the hotel you're talking about, because I hear
It
about a
was
lot of.
called Hilltop House, and it was in the
Oh,
name's gonna come to me any moment now. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. That's the place.
oh,
Yeah, which
ooh,
is a
Harvard.
beautiful little town. We went there we took over the whole hotel. I was part of a Romance Writers of America group that was based out of Washington, D.C. at the time, because that's where I lived. And we went every year in the spring, and it was beautiful, and it was way up high above all the rivers, and it was known, and you'd hear them. You could hear footsteps if you were on the top floor. You could hear footsteps above you at night. There's nothing. There wasn't even an attic up there. you know? So it was well known to be haunted, but nobody was ever, scared or harmed by any of it. It was very benign. So yeah,
Well, I
so
mean,
that was my first adult experience with really something from the other side that I couldn't explain in any other way.
Harper's Ferry. That town, if I'm not mistaken, has a lot of historical significance as it is.
Yeah,
So,
it does, and a lot of old buildings that have been there since, before the Civil War. Um, and, you mentioned my books, and one of the things that I have woven into 4 of the 6 novels that I wrote are these paranormal gifts, and I was doing that even before I had that experience at Harper's Ferry. And so there's a part of me that clearly knew what I could do, but it wasn't my conscious mind by any means.
exactly, you didn't just you weren't woken up by it yet. Kind of,
Right,
you didn't have
right.
your spiritual awakening. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, that's new. Actually, no, no, because I just realized it actually tells you how many people are watching on Twitter, and I never did that before today.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. So let's talk actually about about your abilities. When did you first realize you were a healer, and how did that, like, what did you actually get? Did you get trained by another healer, or did you work it all out on your own?
Some of all of that. I was probably in my early 40s,
Hmm.
and I started into menopause really early in my, like, 39. I had my first hot flash. So by my early 40s, I was in the midst of what turned out to be a really long, hard slog. And I was having a lot of problem with asthma, which I had not really had much before, but it was really becoming an issue. And my best friend, who lives up in about 2.5 hours away from me now, had been seeing a healer up where she lives, and she said, "Laurin, I think this woman could really help you. Maybe you should, make an appointment with her." And I was like, "Well, I'll do anything at this point." You know, I was that desperate. And I said, "But I can't come up there to do this right now. I had kids in school, and my husband was, away 3 days a week at that point working." And I said, "I just can't come up there." She said, "Oh, she can do it over the phone." And I went, "Okay." And I had an hour-long on the phone conversation, a session with this woman, and in that hour, I could feel her working on me.
Hmm.
I could feel the energy of it. I had learned that I could feel energy actually years earlier when I was getting acupuncture, and one day I felt this line of, it felt like ants crawling up my leg from needle to needle, and, the doctor said, "Oh, you're just feeling the energy move, the chi move." So I knew I could feel it, but that was the first time I had really experienced sort of a full body effect of it. And she says to me in the midst of this, it's a healing session, she said, "Mom," she said, "Laurin, your mother is sitting on your chest." And my mother was a narcissist. She went into dementia, about that time too. She was diagnosed, and a really, really hard relationship with her. And so she worked to get my mother off my chest essentially. And she had me do things like blow out hard and help them, to help the energy move. And I have never had asthma since that 1 hour on the phone. And I'm 63 now, so that's 20 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. A couple things I gather from that is one is I need to get acupuncture and try that because I been wanting to try that for years. It just the idea of needles being put in my body kind of turns me off. But
I get that.
but I have been working with a Reiki practitioner for the last 6 months. It seems like, and I know I now know I can feel energy move when she's doing her work.
Good.
So, or when I do it myself, even at this point, I can feel it. So now that makes me want to try acupuncture because I want to see if I can feel it then too. And
yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if everybody does, but I certainly did. And it was surprising to me. I didn't know what it was until the doctor said, "Oh, you're just feeling the energy." So.
Oh yeah. The first time I felt it during Reiki, I started tearing up because it was just like, I didn't know what it was. And it felt good though. It wasn't like it hurt. It felt amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like, it was like, oh my God, this is actually possible. Like, I was always a naysayer for a long time on stuff like that. Even doing this podcast at the beginning, like I believed it was possible. I just never experienced it. But once I experienced it, it was just like, okay, now I fully believe like all these people on my podcast because I can get sensations when they're talking to me and I can kind of feel things go in my head with it. So
you have been attuned. You've been tuned up essentially. You get in the energy of people like me, and my energy is so much higher than it used to be. And it feels good, right? That higher vibration feels good, that higher level of energy. And so people just sort of naturally rise up into it. And it's not a conscious thing at all. I mean, it can be, but it's like walking into a room where people are laughing and you start laughing and you can't explain why. It's that kind of transmission.
It is. I mean, I literally come out of these Reiki sessions and I'm like basically almost skipping, wanting to clap my feet together and everything. Like, it's such a good feeling.
Yep.
I mean, your kids can take that feeling away pretty fast if they're not in a good mood. But I'll tell you that much. But
that's why you have to learn to raise yourself back up.
I have to some degree, but we're also dealing with a narcissist, and that's as much as I can say about that situation. But we're also dealing with a narcissist at the moment, so it's fun,
Oh,
but, well, let me ask you, your healing work, is it related to your writing at all? Like, have you encompassed the two together at this point?
Well, I actually put it in my writing before I knew I was a healer. My last book came out in 2015, so I was getting healing work at that point, but I hadn't really thought about doing it myself. And that same healer that helped me with the asthma, I went back to several years later with a life-changing experience. So can I share that one with you?
Of course you can.
So
we love life-changing experiences.
I have had allergies my whole life. Cats, dogs, pollen, ragweed was my worst. And horses, all kinds of things. Bad allergies. I grew up in the deep South with a lot of mold, with a house full of animals, old house. I always had allergies. And as I was going through that menopausal stage, my allergies got worse and worse and worse. And eventually I was kind of locking myself in the house from about March until after the first freeze in the fall. I'm in Virginia, so that's a pretty big chunk of the year to be kind of shut inside with the air conditioning running constantly to filter the air and air filters going. Medication was not managing it. It was getting worse and worse. And I finally decided that I was going to go to an allergist and get tested for shots because nothing else was working. And this particular allergist did 2 days of shots. So you had to come in 2 days in a row, and they did 25, 30 things in your arm all at once. So the first day I will go in and I'm having that done. And about less than 10 minutes after the nurse got done injecting everything into me, I started going into an anaphylactic reaction, which is a body-wide allergic reaction that is deadly if not controlled. And I knew what was happening because my son has allergies that create anaphylaxis. So we had been through his whole childhood carrying EpiPens around. So I began very calmly to just explain to the nurse what I was experiencing. And she went and got the doctor, and they came in and they worked on me. I think it must have been about an hour. I had multiple rounds of epinephrine. I had Benadryl. I had, they were making sure my airway was open. And I ended up in the ICU overnight just to be, I was stabilized at that point, but just to make sure it didn't rebound, because that's another thing that can happen. So my same friend, she's my best friend. We would talk for hours, several times a week. I told her about this event and she said, well, you should go back and see Wanda, which was the name of the person who helped me with the asthma. And I was like, yeah, I got nothing else to do. And I'm so freaked out by this. I can't get shots and I can't live like this. So I actually made an in-person appointment with her because I got to go visit my friend, stay with her, and then go, so I had the moral support for it. But I didn't tell Wanda why I was there. I just came in for a session. And partly because I kind of wanted to see what would come up. I didn't want to lead it anywhere. And the very first thing she asked me was, Laurin, what do you believe? And I was raised in the Episcopal Church. I haven't gone to church in decades at this point, but I was raised in the Episcopal Church. And so my first thought is belief system is religious. And so I said, well, I believe that there's something greater than us, but I don't go to church. She said, no, that's not it. She said, I'm going to work on you a while and then we'll see what comes up. And she works a lot with angels. That seems to be her major source of information. So after a while, she says to me, Laurin, you believe that you have to be afraid of everything in the world. And I went, no, I don't. Oh, wait a minute. When you live in that state your whole life, you don't know that's not normal, that's not where most people can live. And most people don't live in a state of constant fear. Maybe they do these days. But so she then began to describe to me how she was releasing this fear energy that I was carrying in my body. And she saw it as little black snakes coming out. And then she had me pretend to, or imagine a laser that I could shoot them down with and disintegrate them and let them go. And she worked on me for easily half an hour just on that. And when I got up at the end of that session, she opened the door and she had a cat who I had very carefully not touched and avoided coming in because of my allergies. The cat came in, jumped up on the table I was sitting up on, came up behind me, purring and, rubbing on me. And I reached back and pet that thing with no fear at all. And I walked out of that place with no allergies. And this is probably 15 years ago now. And so I still have a little bit of hay fever in the spring, but I use a nose spray and that's all I need. I was taking, Benadryl and all kinds of things before. And it's just for a little period of time. Other than that, I have no allergies anymore. And it is remarkable. And I am out in the world in ways that I have never imagined I would be able to be. So that for me, I came out of that session realizing that I didn't have allergies, going, I want to do that too. And that's when I started looking into becoming a healer.
Amazing. That story is life-changing, and that is an amazing story. I mean, and it's funny because I know people like that. I met them in my life who are just scared of everything in the world, and they don't even realize they are. They just blame everything else for their cause.
Right.
And I'm like, there's no getting through to them unless they see professionals, and a lot of them are scared to see professionals. So
right. Yeah.
I mean, I wish there was a way to break through to people like that and actually get them to almost trick them into seeing people. But I mean,
yeah, and it takes a while. I mean, I say that happened in an hour, but I also, between those two events with her, I had, been introduced to a psychic reader who told me I'd been a shaman in a previous life or many lives. And I had, my friend had dragged me along with her to, various groups and things so I'd started learning about it. And so I think I was ready for it. I know I was ready for it. As a healer, you can only heal what's ready to shift, is the way I call it. It's ready to shift away from pain, fear, whatever it is, into a better place. So there was preparation.
Makes sense. I mean, so what you're kind of saying though is that people need to learn to be vulnerable in order to control this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vulnerability feels very scary to most of us. And it's actually kind of a superpower. And there was, I ran a women's circle for the 2 years before the pandemic. And I was towards the end of my mom's life. And so a narcissistic mom with dementia, living in a place she doesn't want to be. Her husband kind of deserted her in the last year. So it was just me and her. And I ran this women's group partly because I needed a place where I could talk to women about things that were happening to me that I had nobody else to talk to. And I read it, I led it. So I got to bring whatever we did twice a month. I would bring the topic. I would sort of meditate on it and see what needed to be talked about. And I always came out of there with new perspectives and with a broader view of how I could choose to interact with my mother, how I could maybe even shift my feelings. That was harder to do. But what I heard again and again from the women in there was that they would actually thank me for being vulnerable. I'd be in tears. I, have a hard time talking because it gave them permission to be vulnerable. To see somebody else being vulnerable bravely is powerful.
See, that's something I've always struggled with in my life as well. Because, I mean, you can ask my wife, she'll tell you the same thing. I am too confident most times, and I always think that everything is going to go my way, which it usually does. I've always had the good luck. Like, I've always just had good luck generally, but things always work out. But I mean, I also overlook some things because I am not letting myself be vulnerable because I think I have it all under control always. So that's a little issue I always had. And so I can relate to that a lot because I had to teach myself at one point to like start looking around a little more. I mean, I was the type of guy who would go to like into Boston and leave my car unlocked while I'm parking the side street because nothing's gonna happen to it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I mean, and it always was. There was never anything missing. There was never any damage or any car parts missing. But I'm still learning that to this day. It's still a learning process to teach myself I need to be more careful of everything. But I mean, at the same point, I don't want to get to the point where I am one of those people who's scared of everything.
Right. And there are times where you need to be aware of your physical safety, right? Especially as women, we're trained really early on to be very careful. But understanding that sometimes that's valid. Sometimes, we have fear as a tool because it keeps us safe. You want your kid to learn that if he touches the flame, it's going to burn him. So that the body reacts, and you have that little fear thing that goes, "Oh no, if I touch that, it's going to hurt."
You want them to be able to learn that without actually having to experience it first to learn it. Yeah.
Preferably, yes.
Preferably, yeah.
we sometimes have those hard-headed kids that just have to, experience it first to get through. But so that's, there is a purpose for fear, but we're not meant to live in it all the time. And somebody I met early on when I was just starting in a class, starting to learn how to be a healer, different modalities and things, offered up this beautiful metaphor for how to get rid of the fear or the anxiety or whatever you're carrying that you don't want to carry anymore. She said, if you look at a gazelle, like you see a video of a gazelle in Africa and it's being chased by a cheetah, it's like full out, everything on high alert. And then the minute the cheetah goes away, it shakes itself up and it goes back to eating grass. And so I thought that was great. I mean, you physically can shake things out of your body. So that's what we want to be able to do without having to actually shake ourselves, is to react when we need to, when it's in our best interest to react with fear, but not carry it forward, not keep holding on to it. And that's because that ends up being in your body forever until you do work with somebody to help you get rid of it. And it often turns into pain or disease.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay. All I gotta say is I now have that song "Shake It Off" stuck in my head.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
God help me. I worked in retail too long and had that stuck in my head too many times. God damn it. Well, I mean, and you're right. I mean, it's just, my dogs are the same way. Like, I mean, with them, it's just the wind, though. There's no real predators. It's just literally the wind, and they get all jumped up and hyper, and then they just literally like shake off, and they're like, okay, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
I'm literally standing there freezing my ass off, like, it's the wind, you morons. Let's go inside. God,
Yep.
I love my dogs, but not in the winter so much. In the winter, I dread the time taking them out in the winter. But
yeah,
so
yeah.
But when you mentioned, I mean, I'm gonna go back a little bit to when you mentioned your mother was a narcissist. You mentioned, and that was a lot of the problem. But that laid on you for a while. literally and figuratively. But
Yes.
did you eventually learn to forgive your mom? Like, I'm assuming postmortem, but like
No, actually, it
forgiveness
wasn't
help.
postmortem.
Oh,
It was,
really?
yeah, there was probably the biggest lesson I had with her. And now I am a strong believer that the things that are challenging in our lives are there for a reason. There's something we need to learn from it. Often we've made an agreement with these challenges, whether they're person or some other things, before we've come into this lifetime, because we want to bring something in and heal it, right? And a lot of us who are healers have brought in a ton of shit from past lives this time. Excuse my language,
Oh,
because
right.
it's time to clear it so that we can move into something new. And so my mother, in hindsight's always easier than living in the moment,
Okay.
gave me a ton of lessons. One of which is I'm a very strong woman because I had to be in relationship with her. But the last lesson that I learned from her, and I knew I had to learn it before she died, was forgiveness. And I had resisted forgiving for a long time. I mean, it was like, how can I forgive her? She's done this and this and this and this. Kept telling the stories of all the times that she had gaslit me or undermined me or set me up to fail. And then when I didn't, she got pissed off. You know, when I succeeded, it was like I'd get the backlash. And on top of that, I had an alcoholic dad who was wonderful when he wasn't drinking. But so the two of them together was a real potent way to grow up. But about 4 months before she died, I realized that she was I went to visit her at the place she lived near me, but it was a, assisted living facility.
Yeah.
And she was walking down the hallway and she'd have to stop and she was kind of gasping for breath. And she was not that way. She was, pretty physically able up until about that time. And I visited her again a few days later and it was getting worse. And so I finally took her into, an urgent care and that had her looked at. And they discovered that her abdomen was full of liquid, some sort of liquid. And so they sent us immediately to the hospital so she could get checked out properly. And it turned out, long story short, that she had ovarian cancer and it was
Oh,
already at stage 4. And she wasn't feeling any pain. She didn't know it was happening to her. So for her, it really was not a big deal other than having to get that fluid drained. And for me, it was a wake up moment of she's never going to change, which I knew from the dementia anyway, but I wasn't willing to face it. But I realized at that point she was never going to change into the person I thought she should be. And the only way that I could say goodbye with peace was to forgive her. And it's been a real interesting journey because I was able to do that. And there's a wonderful Hawaiian prayer, the Ho'oponopono prayer. I please, it's like, it's 4 or 5 statements. And one of them is, I thank you. I love you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. It's basically that. And I said it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I then I felt it shift. I felt a real shift in my heart chakra. And I was able to be very present for her in those last few months of her life without the anger and protection. Because I'd learned to protect myself energetically from her a lot over those last few years. And the minute I let go of the defensiveness around her, she softened. And it was
and,
remarkable. She could
and
never change because, in part, I was always, sort of reinforcing that defensive behavior. But when I softened my attitude and my feelings, she softened. And so those last couple of months, particularly, were kind of sweet. They were hard. She's dying. I still hadn't worked through everything, but the forgiveness part of it was magical. And it wasn't something I ever thought I was going to be able to do.
Wow. I mean, then it's always a shame when that happens. I mean, it's meant to happen then, but it's a shame that it happens that late in their life where it's you don't get to spend as much time as you could afterwards with them. I mean, I I mean, your parents kind of remind me somewhat of my parents. The father, not so much. I mean, but I had an amazing father. I mean, yeah, he would go to the bar after work once in a while, but he was actually he was a fun drunk. So it
Oh,
wasn't like he. There's a difference. There's a big
yeah, there
difference.
is a difference. There is a difference because mine was an angry drunk. He was wonderful when
Mm.
he wasn't drunk, but he was an angry drunk. Yeah.
My mother, on the other hand, my father would always see the positive in every situation, even negative ones. He would see the positive, and he would try to tell you like it's gonna be okay because this is why it's gonna be okay, and he would always be happy for you if you accomplish something, no matter how
Hmm.
small a feat. He would be happy for you. My mother has always been the opposite. She
Hmm.
sees the negative to this day in every situation, and it's just, I mean, I lost my car. I lost my car back in September when a town near the town I live in flooded, and I got stuck
Mm.
in a big. I got stuck in a big puddle, and basically my car shorted out completely, and it was wrecked at that point. So,
Yeah.
um, I mean, I saw the positive right away, but I'm like, well, this car. I've been driving this car for a decade. I've been needing a new car anyway, so insurance is going to buy me a car now. But
Right.
that's how I thought about it. Of course, my mother did not see it that way and went the complete opposite way of, oh, this is horrible. This is the last thing you need right now. Like, it is, but it also is gonna. And yeah, I had to borrow her car for like a month. Thank you, mom. But
Hmm.
still, it's just
Yeah.
like yeah, I have to borrow your car, and you're calling me every day for the first 2 weeks of that month, saying like, oh, you're worried that something's happened to the car. I'm like, no, it's not. I've been driving for 20 years at this point. Like, nothing's gonna happen to the car. But
Hmm.
it's just like you got to. I try to teach my kids this too. You got to see the positive in every bad
Yeah.
situation because that's the only way
Yeah.
you're going to get through things is if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's something that was not good at. I was a catastrophizer for a long time because life had shown me that it could be a catastrophe pretty often. But I
Yeah.
was
Oh
lucky
God,
enough.
yes.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to marry a man who had grown up in a Leave It to Beaver family and is very calm and very logical. And even when our son came along, who was very sickly as an infant, even he was my rock. And I literally would ask him, and especially in our early days of our marriage, and when we were dating, I would go, "I'm I'm having this experience with my parent because they were both alive at the time. Is that normal?" You know? And he would either go, "Yeah, that's normal," or he'd go, "Oh, no, that's not normal." So there was a validator, part there, but he's always the one who's been, "We're gonna be okay. This is hard, but we're gonna be okay." And so it is good to have someone like that in your life. It really is. And it's taught me to begin to look at things in a more positive way. So I do that now.
Exactly. I try to teach my kids that every day of my life when they get upset. It's just, which with my kids is often because they just don't understand some things. But I mean, kids be kids. But I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's just, I always try to teach them like there's a benefit to everything in the world. You just got to find it sometimes. You got to dig through things to find it sometimes. It's not going to be presenting itself to you saying, here I am.
Yeah.
But,
And sometimes
but
it doesn't make itself understood for a long time. I mean, there's things that I look back on now and go, "Oh, that was why it had happened." So, yeah. So, but you do have to look for the good, and I think that's something really important in the world right now. Is we need to be looking for the good because the bad is
exactly.
really in our face.
In a world where there's a hole in the sun, the size of the Earth times seven, it's getting bigger every day. It seems like, yeah, that's there's, and the government doesn't want to admit anything's happening. Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah.
gotta love it. So yeah, you
Yeah.
have to. These days more than ever, you have to stay positive. I mean, I think the last 3 years
Yes.
taught us that. But
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it
well,
it really will affect your health. I mean, one of the things I
mhm,
like about what you've said is that you just expect the good things. You're
yeah,
setting an intention for good things to come to you. You're actually magnetizing that to you when you have those kinds of thoughts and especially if you state them, verbally or write them down. It's no coincidence that you hear about magicians having their spells or witches having their spells. Those are words. Words are powerful. They're magical. And if you can bring more of the positive words into your, whether it's just into your brain or into your life verbally, it's incredibly powerful what it can make happen for you in your life.
It is. I mean, manifestation is a very real thing. I try to teach my kids this all the time as well. Like, if you want, I mean, and they're pretty good at vocalizing what they want. So, I mean, just and act. I just tell them, act like you're going to get it. Act like you're going to get it. Don't expect me to buy it, but act like you're going to get it somehow.
Yeah, act as if you already have. It's really powerful. Your brain is not. It doesn't differentiate now from later or now from the past. It always feels it's right, like it's happening to you right now. So if you are living those old stories, like I did with my mother, of all the harm that had come, then your brain thinks you're still there. So you're going to experience all of that experience, and you're going to bring more of that to you. If you instead, visualize the beautiful relationship you have with your mother in the future, but you just act as if it's already that way in your brain, and you tell yourself it is, and tell you that story, you actually rewire your brain and you change the way your body reacts. So I'm reading a Joe Dispenza book right now, so I got all this right in front of my mind.
Yeah, I mean, well, I talked to enough people who say the same thing, and that's what they do for a living, is they try to teach people that method of manifestation and meditation and all that put together. But so, to bring it a little more back to the paranormal side of things, how do you? I mean, I've heard a lot of people answer this question, but it's always different, and that's the interesting part. How does someone know if they have gifts that are metaphysical or spiritual? Like, how does someone realize they have gifts?
That's a really good question. I know I have mine because my best friend would say to me, Laurin, I saw somebody try this. Why don't you try it? I bet you can do it. And she's never come up with something I couldn't do. I'm multi-abled, I guess, when it comes to this stuff. But I think a lot of it is just beginning to pay attention to your gut instincts, your intuition, those little voices in your head, that little knowing that I really shouldn't go that way because I don't know why, but I shouldn't go that way. I'm going to drive this way this time. And then you find out later there's a big wreck in that way. Those little things those are your gifts trying to get your attention. They're actually still, you are expressing your gifts through that, but you haven't recognized them yet. You haven't become consciously aware of using that ability. And for me, it really just came from play. Let me play with this. I have a pendulum. I usually have it right here. Oh yeah, it's right in front of me. I have a pendulum right on my desk. And this was one of the first things I learned to play with. And I would just ask it yes and no questions, and I would watch it answer. And it wasn't always the way I would have answered, So, having things to play with, I started playing with oracle cards. I really played with them. I just pulled them out and said, let's see what comes up, and then I learned that I was actually getting messages from them, that what I had, intuited from the cards was what happened, or was the direction that I went in, so bring a sense of play to it. And pay attention to your body. Your body is a great communicator. For me, I feel energy in the palms of my hands. So when I was first learning, I would walk up to a tree and say, can I feel this tree's energy? Oh yeah, I can. I'd feel a little tingling, and just start there, because that opens your senses up beyond your five senses. And you begin to learn the language of them.
See, I've been told I'm an empath. I don't have any definitive proof of this completely yet, but I have like, the reason I'm bringing this up even is because even as soon as you lifted that pendulum up, all of a sudden, because my towel is always my upper torso, I get a feeling through my chakra, one of my chakras, near my heart, whatever, something's near, or there's some kind of energy work going on. And as soon as you lift that pendulum, my chest got all tingly, and I was like, what just happened? I'm like, something just happened. And I'm like, it's one of my friendly household spirits in the garage with me, maybe. But I mean, you have, because I learned through this podcast, I have abilities talking to healers, talking to mediums, talking to psychics, and I'm sorry, everybody, clairvoyants, and all the other professions I cannot think of at this moment. That's because I started feeling things in my head, in my chest, when I would talk to them, and I'm like, I started actually, like, at first few times I didn't want to say anything about it. I was like, this is weird, but after a couple times I was like, screw it, you know what? And I just started telling these people, like, I'm getting a really strange, and they would be like, because you have abilities and you are now, they're opening.
They're
like,
opening.
You diving into this world with everybody else in the paranormal field is making, like, your abilities just activate, and it's making you want to, your body wants to find out more about it. So that's why I started the Reiki, when I found someone that agreed to do it for just free promotion of my show, and it just worked. Because and now I'm excited. I mean, I've been told I'm in my awakening. I'm waiting to see how it ends. I'm waiting to see how it ends, because it's
it's a journey.
Chaos. the chaos of that definitely ensues, and life. And for the last 5 months, life has been chaotic, but even longer than that. But really, the last 5 months has been chaotic as hell. But so, I mean, it's true. I mean, I've been told everybody has gifts, and I think that might be true, just at different levels. I don't think everybody's not going to be John Edwards sitting on stage, like, I mean, bad example, because he's not really a real psychic, I don't think. But I don't think, at least. I don't know. I have my doubts about him a lot.
Even I mean, I can channel, I can do the healing work. I read the cards. I'm a shaman, so I do shamanic work. I do all these different things, but I'm better at some of them than others. And so I find that I'm sort of now, instead of being a jack of all trades kind of healer, I'm really dialing into the things that I find the most powerful for me. That's not the same as some of my teachers. They've got different areas that their particular strengths are in that. And so I find that, for me at least, and a lot of the people that I know starting out will try a lot of things. We'll take Reiki, we'll become Reiki masters. We'll take other kinds of healing things. We'll listen to channelings. We'll, be amongst other people who are talking about this stuff. And slowly you kind of figure out where what your jam is. And I absolutely believe everybody can, open up their gifts. Not everybody wants to. Exactly. Not everybody came here to do that, but a lot of people did this time. So, yeah.
Well, and that's funny you say that they didn't come here to, because it kind of brings me to a question I've been sitting on since the earlier discussion, because you mentioned angels, and as someone who was raised religious but really isn't religious anymore in that sense of actually going to church and whatnot, what do you actually believe? Like, what do you think angels are? Because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and it doesn't. People don't always mean like the heavenly creatures we know from the Bible or from the Torah or from other writings.
Here's what I've learned over the years from talking to spirit a lot. And really, whether you call them angels or gnomes or, your ancestors, they're all part of just the great spirit. I call it great spirit, or the universe, all that is. It's God for some people, but I get a little triggered by that word, so I don't use that word. But as humans, we like names, we like categories. It helps us to understand and put the puzzle pieces together. So often you will find that people's experience with spirit reflects whatever culture they live in. So somebody who's grown up, a Hindu, will experience the Hindu goddesses and gods and the Hindu spirits as their spiritual people. I grew up in an Episcopal church, so for me, angels make a lot of sense. But I also have a lot of Native American guides, and that's from the shamanic work that I've done. My very first guide to show up was a Native American woman, and so Golden Eagle Woman is her name. And so the fact that we like to differentiate and like, these are angels and they're maybe higher than these angels, or they're, whatever. Some people have unicorns and dragons, and, it doesn't matter. It's all the same energy, but it helps us. I think it makes us more comfortable as human beings to be able to name them and identify what they are. I honestly did not care about doing any of that, but my my friend Pamela, who I have mentioned a couple times already, um, she wanted to know when I was channeling for her, who am I talking to? You know, it's like I don't. It feels kind of masculine to me. I don't know, but so she started really pushing for more detail. She's a very right-brained thinker. She's trained as an engineer in college, you know, that kind of stuff. So she
Okay.
wanted all that kind of, you know, that she wanted to line it up and put it all together. I am so seriously left brain or right brain, whatever. I'm the loosey goosey intuitive. Put the puzzle together by looking at all the pieces and going, ooh, there, click. I don't think linear very easily. So it really is just symbolism for us. How do we differentiate? And I have so many guides these days that I refer to them as my all y'all. I grew up in the deep south. So they're my all y'all because some of them have been identified as angels. I have two archangels that showed up very early for me, Michael and Uriel. Michael seems to be a primary one for a lot of people.
He does.
I'm finding. Um,
I've heard that.
and
I've
I
heard that
knew
name
I
a
knew
lot.
nothing about them. I didn't know anything about them because I had been a kid really when I left the church, and so I really didn't know what archangels were and who, what their gifts or what their specialties were. Um, but apparently, it's just in the zeitgeist, for people who've grown up in the kind of culture I have.
Oh yeah.
I have a lot of Native Americans. That's probably most of mine are that way. I had a surfer dude. He had died in the 1970s. He showed up. It just made me laugh. And he very quickly actually moved on to my daughter. It's like I was a conduit for him to become one of her major guides. And so I was able to, she was telling me, Mom, I'm getting poked in the back by something. It's like, oh, that's your guides. One of your guides is trying to get your attention. And I bet I know who it is because he did that to me too, kind of thing. So she's very open to this stuff. But my son is more the scientist kind of mind person. But so I really think that it's all really just the same energy. It's the energy of the universe. It's this oneness that we all came from and go back to. And that when we come in as humans, it is a particular piece of that oneness, but it's more the memories of that piece. It's not like we come in as the same person every time, but we do bring the memories, the experiences. It's much like I say to my clients when I'm doing healing work, we're going to let go of the pain, but you get to keep the wisdom. So it's kind of painful to be human. I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not easy to be a human, and there's a lot that happens in a very short period of time. And so my feeling is that when we go back and join the oneness, when we leave our bodies, that same collection of knowledge and wisdom and experience comes back, or doesn't have to. And I know that there are people who are here as humans the first time, but they have incarnated elsewhere before, into a body of some sort before. Um, so it's fascinating, but I don't think there's any real like hierarchy of spirit. It's
Mm,
just how we interpret it.
I see. You kind of opened the door to something I was hoping you would, and I mean,
Good.
because I've been told before that this is something I almost fully believe is that alien. I mean, the Scientology. I'm not going to give them any credit because no, they got it wrong. But
Mm.
we are extraterrestrial spirits. And when you say that they've been in other bodies before, I had a feeling that's kind of what you're alluding to is that they've been to other sentient beings around this universe
Yeah,
at some point.
yeah,
And
yeah. Other planets, other places.
which I mean makes sense because I mean there's no denying that there's other life forms in this universe because there's too many experiences with them based
Yeah,
on people's stories that even if most people are lying, there's still some that have to be true. So at least
yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, what I find often, I have an anthropology degree, a cultural anthropology degree. So I
All right.
really love culture and that. And so often you find these similar things in diverse cultures that are,
Mm-hmm.
beings of light, whatever. And I just don't see any way that many people will come up with the same kind of experience when they're in such diverse cultures with such different belief systems. Plus, the universe is just too freaking big for there not to be other, kinds of beings out there. I mean, that seems like common sense to me.
And it's ever expanding. It's
Yeah.
ever expanding. And we are, if we've only been around for so long, I'm not going to say years. I don't even know how many years. No one really knows how many years we've been around. But we are not the edge of the universe. So think about all the universe that came before us and how long it's been around, but longer than us. And gee, if there was any kind of life out there, which I'm sure there is, because there has to be, wouldn't they have evolved way past the point we did to where they can do things we can't do, like travel through the universe? So, I mean, or in between the universe, if you believe in ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional extraterrestrials. But,
Yeah, at a point, my brain goes, I can't, I can't figure that one out.
Rick and Morty opened the door for a lot of people to understand that finally. But I mean, for people to say still that maybe these spirit guides are extraterrestrial spirits as well that are coming down. I mean, star seeds are a thing for a reason, and people, and I know plenty of psychics and healers who talk to what they believe are extraterrestrial spirit guides, and they just are spirits from somewhere in the universe that guide them and teach them things on a daily basis and tell them how to live their lives. And it's usually good advice from what I hear.
But it's when I first started hearing that kind of advice, I was meditating, and one day I realized I had this whole, I didn't call it a download at the time. I call it a download now, but I had this whole download. I was worried about one of my nieces. She's having some health issues and I wanted to help her. And so she was in my mind, and I got this whole download about how to talk to her about, what I could do to help her. And it was so wise and so loving and so not what my brain was trying to figure out. And so I dubbed it Wise Laurin. It was like, wow, there's something else here, and she's really wise. And I'm just going to take, I'm going to take credit for it, but it's Wise Laurin. It's not this human Laurin, So there really is, and I really depend on communicating with my guides, and I do it more sometimes and less other times. I sort of have a constant low grade conversation going on with them most days, but there's times, and lately I've been like, I need to be more consciously in connection with them. And so I meditate, or I'll channel them, or I actually, most of the time I channel them on my computer. I'll type out my questions and then let them flow through me. I love that for people who want to play with it, because when you're really connecting with spirit, you will see a difference in the language, the phrasing, the words chosen. When I do that with my guides, it's always more formal than I would be writing and speaking. And I'm a writer, so I'm very aware of what my voice is as a writer. But it's fascinating to be able to look at it after you're done with the conversation. I mean, you have a conversation, ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer. And then I'll go back and read it. And the first time I did that, my friend Pamela was like, Laurin, I bet you could do this. Try this. And I was shocked because it was so clearly not me answering. And that is really validating if you want to, play with that.
Yeah. I mean, scribing or having a spirit write through you it's different because they're not writing in the same word set, in the same word sense, in the same, the hell am I thinking of? And this, they're not writing it in the same style you would write.
Yeah, the metaphors are different. A lot of times the grammatical construction of a sentence is much more formal. I used to read a lot of like 18th and 19th century British literature, so I have a real, in my head, I have a real idea of what that language sounds like, and that's more what I get from my guides, is that more formal language of times past, I would say. But I love the metaphors that they use and the symbolism that they use, because it's not what I'm always like, wow, that's good. I'm going to have to borrow that one,
Exactly.
So it's fascinating to me to do that. And that's something I started playing with early. And it really, that's where I really opened up to talking with my guides regularly in a conscious and purposeful way. And that's a life-changing thing too.
Yeah, which I mean, I'm actually happy you brought up writing in a way, because I did want to spend the last part of this podcast talking about your books, because I
Mm,
just looking at the covers and reading the descriptions of like the series, I'm like, I kind of want to read these now, because I am a sucker. I'm a sucker for some good magic realism and some
yeah.
romance involved. Definitely always is a plus, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
I'm a sucker for that. What can I say?
I used to read a lot of fantasy. My older brother, he's 8 years older than me. He handed me The Hobbit when I was about 10 or 11, and I devoured it. And he said, "Oh, good, you liked it. Here, there's 3 more stories," and he handed me the trilogy. So I read that, and that kind of led me into a long relationship with high fantasy. I loved Marion Zimmer Bradley and Anne McCaffrey and a whole bunch of others. Mercedes Lackey's another favorite. I don't read a lot of that anymore, but when it came to writing, I spent a lot of years trying to figure out what I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't know what I wanted to write. And it was it was a lot overwhelming to me to think about having to do the world building of fantasy. Um, but I realized, because I have Scottish roots, and so I've been to Scotland a couple times, and grew up with the American Clan Gregor Society here. My grandparents were a big part of that, and I went to a lot of their things. I grew up with this understanding of my Scottish roots, and it's Highlanders. And, all of them were Highlanders. McGregors were like the black sheep of the Highlanders, period. Horse thieves and all kinds of things. But so I thought, you know what? I can research that. I don't have to make it up. I can research that. Well, I chose the 1300, right around 1300, which turned out to be about the time of that Braveheart movie. I don't know if you ever saw it, but
Of course.
it's that same period of history in Scotland. And that I had already chosen my time period before that came out. And so I thought, okay, so in the culture of this time, magic was accepted. It was a part of the culture. You had seers, you had the medicine women, you had, the dowsers to find you water, that kind of thing. And it was just an accepted part of the culture. So I thought, well, how cool would that be? Because then I could bring in this sort of high fantasy magic, but I wouldn't have to go build a whole world. I could just research the world. I could go visit this place. And so I did. My friend Pamela and I went to Scotland for a trip, and to do research. We went to 10 castles, 10 medieval castles in 5 days, kind of thing.
Nice.
Um, so that was why I sort of landed in medieval Scotland. I had also become a romance writer in my quest of what do I want to write, or a romance reader. So that had led me to romances, and then I discovered Scottish romances, and that's when I kind of went, okay, that's the perfect storm for me. So my first book is actually about a healer, and she doesn't like her healing gift because it's being misused by the villain in the story, and so it's about her journey to accepting her gift, and meeting somebody who helps her because she doesn't fight it. It doesn't hurt her anymore, because when she's not doing it willingly, it hurts to come through her. And I wrote that long before I knew. That was, gosh, I sold that one in 2002. So I think it came out in 2002. So how many years ago is that now? And so that was my first one, and that's the one that it won the National Reader's Choice Award. It won 2 unpublished awards just before it got bought. I landed my agent with it, so that was a magical book for me. And that's called The Devil of Kilmartin. Um, and I actually imagined the story starting in a stone circle, and I knew what it looked like. And then I realized it existed. So I had imagined it, never knew that the Kilmartin Glen was there, never heard of it before. I didn't know the name of it, but I knew what I was looking for on a map as a place where this would make sense. And there it was. So I actually I have photographs. They're actually, printed old school photographs of me in the circle that I had imagined this story starting in. And I found with all
Awesome.
of my books, when I went looking for, when I would imagine what I wanted for the story, I would go looking. I would lay maps out on my floor of my office, and I would just kind of be intuitively led. That looks like a good spot. What's going on? Oh, look, they have a castle where the wall has fallen, which I'd already written for one of my books. Having a castle where one of the walls fell at the beginning of the book, and that was right there. So it's this amazing confluence of my intuition, past life. I'm convinced I've lived there before. I felt like I was coming home when I went there as an adult. And the writing part I came in. So all of my books have really strong women. 4 of the 6 books have this sort of magical aspect to them. 2 of them are considered straight, traditional historical romance. And they're very good, but they don't have the paranormal aspect to them. In fact, one of those Charming the Shrew, I didn't want to tame her. I wanted her charmed, is my bestseller. And that's just a straight historical. So, but yeah,
Well,
so it's fun.
who doesn't love a good historical romance? I mean, come on now.
Oh yeah.
There's enough Doctor Who fans out there to sell that book 100 times over. So
yeah. Well, good. Good.
But I mean, it's just, I mean, I've always been a history buff in a way. So history to me is very special. You can tell a lot of stories in history that easily could have happened in some form or degree. But
yeah. Well, and I love the medieval time in Scotland because it was not a literate society. They weren't taught to read and write. So the wealthy were, but so there's not a lot written about what their day-to-day life is. So I really went to the culture and the archaeology and based a lot of what I brought into the books on that. And that was fun because I got to bring in my anthropology stuff.
Of course. I mean, anthropology, it's one of those things I always thought about doing, but I was like, you're not gonna be
there's no work.
Jones. There's no work. Yeah. that's one of those degrees when your parents are like, that's great, but what are you gonna do with it? Like, that's like going to get a bachelor's in art. Okay.
On the other hand, I find I've used it quite a lot in my work because it helps me understand people.
you found a knack for it. Yeah. That's a good thing. Well, why don't you tell my audience where they could find your books, where they could find you, where they could find your spiritual services, everything about you.
So everything is on my website, which is heartlightjoy.com. My books are all available on Amazon, mostly there because Amazon is my official publisher. They have their own publishing house. And they also come in Audible, so you can get them there. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all the links to that are on my website. So heartlightjoy.com. You can buy my books directly through my website. They'll come from Amazon. I do get a tiny little kickback from that. That's what supports my own reading habit. So, yeah. And if you want to have a chat with me, I offer a free call. And that's also available on my website. And then if you want to sign up for my newsletter, which comes out about once a week, you can do that and you'll get a free download from me, my top 3 ways to communicate with your spirit guides. And then I also have a podcast, Curiously Wise, Practical Spirituality in Action.
Oh, I didn't realize you had a podcast.
Yeah.
Dang, I would have. I'll make sure all these things will be in the description.
Add it to your list.
I shall. And folks, if you don't get a chance to write down as you're listening to this, it will all be in the description, of course. I always try to make sure my guests are well represented. But
appreciate that.
Of course. It's why I do this. And I want to thank Laurin for coming on. It's been a fun, very insightful conversation that I enjoyed immensely. Yeah, unfortunately, me too. Unfortunately, I gotta go clean out a chicken coop, so it's I have to go do work actually instead of having fun. But
I really appreciate this. This has been a fun conversation.
Of course. And to all my listeners, watchers, thank you. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and you know where you can find me. If you don't listen to the outro, I'm not going to shame you this time. I'm in a good mood, but still, shame if you don't know. But I will see you guys again, I believe, someday this week. I'll see you someday this week. Don't worry. And I'm pretty sure maybe tomorrow even. I think I might have something tomorrow. I don't know anymore. I lose track. But I'll see you sometime next few days. Until then, have a good one. And one last time, thank you, Laurin, for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.